Hello, everyone. Welcome to our episode today of Azure Connections. My name is Michael Palermo. I'm with the Developer Relations team, and joining me today is...
Hi, my name is Shruti Kuber. I'm also with Developer Relations and I'm a developer evangelist.
And Shruti, is this your first live stream with our team?
It is my first live stream ever, not just with this team. So yeah, I'm super excited.
Woohoo! All right. Well, I'm so glad that you're joining us today. And in fact, I say today, just like we've had Richard, another one of our teammates, join us. You are also based out of Berlin, is that correct?
That I am. Yes, I'm based out of Berlin and it's already night here. So
exactly. So thank you for joining us this evening for you. It's a midday here. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. Peter, the guy somewhere out there in the producer land universe, is based out of Seattle. So we're glad that Peter's around. Hey, we just want to make sure that everyone knows that one of the benefits, of course, of joining us on this live stream is that you can interact. This is live. So Shruti is going to be our moderator in the chat. So as we go through our episode today, if you have questions, we encourage you, please type them in. We're going to be monitoring those. She might interrupt me and say, Mike, we've got a question, so we hope to get that kind of interaction. Also, I just want to call out that the mods in the chat today are going to be, I think Peter is Here Dev and also Nightbot for helpful linking. And then Shruti, what is your alias within the chat so people know who you are as a moderator?
So it is Kubera speaking.
Okay. And that also, if I'm not mistaken, that might be your Twitter alias as well. Is that right?
That is right. That's all across all platforms. So it's Kubera speaking across all platforms.
Good. Nice branding there. I do the same. Palermo 4 for me everywhere. Okay. So what is our exciting topic for today? So Shruti, I'm really glad that you're joining us for today's topic. So our episode of Azure Connections, this is episode 3, is on Places, our Places API, which I think is a really fun one to discuss and explore. But the reason why I'm glad you in particular are joining us today or this evening is because I know that you've had experience with this API. I know you've been to hackathons and workshops or events where this has been used. Could you give me like an example of something that you've done in the recent, whatever kind of events where you were using the Places API or helped some others to do it?
So funny enough, Places was the first API I used when I started with Here. So my first blog was about doing a pub crawl with Here. And I used the Places API to find pubs around me and to do like a walking pub crawl with the Android SDK. So that's the Places API is super special to me. And then just yesterday, I had a workshop at the Beuth University in Berlin.
Oh.
And in the workshop, we try to put up a map, search for all the snack places around you, and then which ones are actually near you by using isoline routing. So cool. I've been using that a lot for looking for food places because that's something I really love.
Me too. I think all of us do. So if you're a foodie out there and you're a developer, you've definitely come to the right episode because we're going to be exploring some of that. So that's really what we're going to be embracing today is our Places API. But I also want to call out, this is episode 3. And what that means is that our first 2 episodes also explored other topics that you might find very beneficial that are very complementary to today's topic. The first one was on map images and map tiles. Our second one was on geocoding, and I believe our fearless leader in the producer land world will put the links into our live stream so that you can, in fact, see those episodes. If you haven't seen them before, I highly recommend that you take a look because we've had a lot of views, especially on the first episode. I think it's worth exploring if you haven't seen, again, on map images or on geocoding. So With that said, and I know they're there, thanks, Peter. I would like to now transition into code.
Let's go.
All right. So what you see on the screen, Shruti, I wanted to first talk about, I do this in each one of our episodes. I think it's important to put the context of, before we just dive into the Azure way of doing things, let's get just a little bit of context on what it would take for, let's say, a simple web call. So I got just a static HTML page. I'm not bringing in all sorts of things like Vue and React and all that. This is just a static HTML page to just show how simple it would be to call our RESTful API for Places directly, nothing else, right? So we'll start with that context. And the first thing I want to highlight is what do you see here on lines, what do you think this is on lines 11 and 12?
So that is the app ID and app code that you would get if you register as a developer. And so these are basically your credentials to get into the world of your map APIs. And with these APIs, you would be able to call our APIs, get results, display them, blah, blah, blah. But then, yes, they're your personal APIs.
Yes. So in order for you, if you don't know what that means or you need some assistance on that, developer.here.com, you go right there. Perhaps there might be, I'll ask Peter to maybe just throw that into the area, and he will eventually, but just so if you need that registration link, developer.here.com, that's how you can sign up for free. We don't require a credit card up front. 250,000 transactions a month. You could use production or prototyping, whatever, but that's how you acquire your own app ID and app code. Typically, as Shruti knows, we would not be sharing this publicly. You would not be sharing this publicly, but for demo purposes, I'm using what you see on the screen here. I can use, of course, in demo, but you would not share yours app ID and app code. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So next, Shruti, you probably are familiar with this. On line 13, what does that look like to you?
So line 13 is basically the endpoint you would be calling to get a response for places that you want to see. So what we're doing here is we have an API called Places, and within Places, we have different endpoints. So the endpoint that I can see on line number 13 is the auto suggest API or the auto suggest endpoint that Michael is using here.
Yeah, excellent. That's exactly what I'm doing. So, and then when we get into, we're going to have a lot of fun with this, because when we get into the Azure discussion, we're going to dive into more on what Shruti's talking about. What are different variations of this endpoint, right? But for right now, she's right. I'm just using auto-suggest. The next line, I'll just explain, I want to make sure and grab the element on the page that we're going to put the results in. We're calling it display. I have this little thing called @in, which just lets me change the context of my search to be at a place or in a place. But again, we'll get into that when we go into our Azure stuff. I have a default, so I'm not even asking the end user to type anything in this particular page. I'm hard coding. This is a geolocation that happens to be in my hometown area of Phoenix, Arizona. So that's just what we've got there. And look at that. You're going to be so happy, Shruti. Look at line 17. I got food.
Right up my alley.
See? So, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, let's construct on line 19 the full endpoint with all the parameters required to make the call. So we're adding in our app ID and our app code, those required credentials. We're also saying, let's search at this location. We're going to search at that location according to line 15. And the query is going to be on food. API just basically means, like you said, the starting of that endpoint. That's all that is. So we've constructed that. I get all the results. So let's show everyone what those results look like, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the result that comes back in JSON and also how it's getting displayed on the page. So with that said, I'm going to move over to our browser. As you can see, I already have it here, category foods, food market. You know, when we said, let's get food, I'm seeing the first three responses are, well, we have some categories here: foods, food, drink, food market, food and drink. So, but you'll notice food dash drink, food dash drink, food dash drink. So that's one of these categories. Then if I expand, because I did a console.log just to take a look at what our results would look like. And as I explore these results, you'll notice that those first three are shown as categories. So foods, food city, food market, these are our categories. If I expand that type, you'll see that that result type is in fact a category. But this fourth one here, which would be number 3 here because it's a zero-based array, the result type, well, I guess it is saying it's a, maybe I am wrong. Maybe it is the actual fourth. 0, 1. Yeah, my bad. But the result type is actually place. It's an actual place with an address, right? And then if I scroll to the very bottom, you'll see here foods, foodie-ish, food. I mean, all these different. Yeah. So what this recommends, or what this is, if I scroll to the very bottom and look at this, you'll see that the result type is query. Now, this is perfect. Like if the person is typing something and as they're typing, you want to show them a list of things that they could be searching for. I could be creating a little drop-down menu of these values. That's why I would use the result type query for. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah. So if I were to be typing something specific, I would still get results based on my query and not specifically a category or something.
That's correct.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So auto suggest, in this example, it's really returning several types of results in one result. So I'm getting categories, I'm getting places, I'm getting query results. So that's why I started with it, because it's kind of a fun one to see right off the bat. But just so you know, there's no smoke and mirrors, I'm going to go back over to the code and let's change our query to something else. I mean, I put food here. Why don't you think of one? But while you're thinking of one, I'm going to put one in that's kind of near and dear to me right now. It might be something like Cairo. Cairo. Let's see what happens when I search on that. So I'm going to go back over and refresh. And what you're going to see is a whole bunch of chiropractic places came up. And again, all the query terms for it are down below. But, maybe in my case, sadly, that kind of care is not going to work because it just won't. So I might now need a doctor.
Oh.
And I'll search on that and I'll go back over here. This is my way of just kind of lamenting, but I'll do this refresh. And now, again, you see category doctor, hospital, healthcare, all sorts of addresses. And plus, again, based on query, I can search for doctors, or it's even showing even in other languages that might be relevant to my area. So that's just a little bit of the REST API. Did you have a search term that you might want to
do.
try?
So I only where Lacoste wants to search for wine and liquor. Can we do that?
You want me to put wine and liquor?
Wine.
Just wine.
Just wine.
Wine. Okay. So excellent. Let's give it a try. So again, if you were in the Phoenix, Arizona neck of the woods, look at all these different places that are available for you, Shruti. And you have winery. Promising. Yeah. So that's excellent. So for those who are watching, keep in mind that we haven't visually seen anything on a map, right? This is one of the things I like about doing a demo like this, is to help some understand that location services don't necessarily always mean you have to see a visualization on a map. Granted, we love visualizations on a map, but this API is truly something that can be used for data as well. And we're getting that list of data. You may want to use this data any way you want. Maybe you will want to pin it on a map. You could, because when we look at our result sets, you'll notice that, for example, if I just choose any one of these, I'm going to have a position here where I could use this coordinate to pin it to a map. So that's really easy to do, right? But I wanted to make the focus on the data, what we're actually getting. And so you'll notice that if we expand out, and I've already done it here on this side, but we expand out, we can get a lot of good data with this as well. So including what category it would probably be listed in. So even though we asked for wine, we did get a hardware house garden shop.
Garden shop.
But you know what? Wine can exist in many areas. You never know.
Why not? Why not?
Right. Okay. So with that stated, I now want to go back over to our code view, and I'm going to go to our next demo, which is going to be doing the same thing we've just done, but in the context of Azure. And so when I scroll down here, you'll notice that I have just a few different things on the page, such as for starters, I've now allowed us to type. So instead of going back and forth, to the code page, we can actually just type results or type our query into a text box, and then press a button and then have it displayed. Now, as far as these things are concerned, I have some values here, but I'm going to delete them intentionally because I want to show everyone that's watching, how would you populate these yourself so that you could do this with Azure? So with those gone, I mean, they're going to get replaced again, but I want everyone to see how you would do it. So this is what I would do. I'm going to go over to the Azure portal, which right now is doing this big hurrah, Ignite, is coming in 4 days, But what I'm interested in is going to the marketplace. I want to go to the Azure Marketplace. And when I go to the Azure Marketplace, now, granted, I'm logged in right now. If I search in the marketplace for here, you'll notice that we have a variety of things that you can use. And the one that we're interested in is the Here Maps and Location Services. This is the one that will give us a template of a whole bunch of functions. So if I click on this, it'll actually help us to appreciate what those functions are. Now, I've already deployed this to my environment, so I don't need to get it now. But if you are watching and you would like to have the same kind of feature or follow along at your own pace, maybe watching this when we put it on demand on our channel later, you would click Get It Now, you would deploy it. Once it's deployed, you will get to a screen that looks like this, where you have a series of functions that you can call. And as you can see on my screen right now, I have Fleet Telematics. That's another one I think you've had some experience with, haven't you?
Yes, definitely.
Geocoder. Oh, please go ahead.
No, just the Fleet Telematics truck routing is something super interesting. So if you haven't, you should check it out.
I agree. Yeah. We've already in our last episode talked about Geocoder. In the first episode, we talked about Map Image and Map Tile, but we are focused on places as of today. Now, while this is loading up, because what it's going to do is actually load the actual code that gets deployed into your Azure environment. And I think what's important to note about this is that once this code is here, all this code you see on the screen, it is now yours, meaning it's not immutable. It's not that you can't change it. You could do whatever you want with this code here. In fact, the benefit of using these serverless Azure functions is that you could add your own business logic here. You could do things here to make these your own compelling either internal or external APIs. But at this point, how would I just call it right out of the box? So in other words, I'm not going to make any changes to it. I just want to use it just the way it is. Maybe I'll add some of my own business logic later. The way that I would call it is, you'll see there's this little link at the top here called Get Function URL. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to copy this to the clipboard. But what that is that URL is basically the guidance of how you would call this particular Azure function, this places one. Now, do you see at the top here, it has this little thing called, there's this like identifier. It's an application or identifier. And
Right.
see places here. No matter which thing I click on, whether it's geocoder or whether it's places, that remains the same. It's kind of like the ID of this entire application of functions, right? However, when I get the get function URL, that is going to contain some specific information just for the places call. So in order to see that, I'm going to switch over to the code view and just right here, maybe I'll just, oops.
So Michael, let me see if I have it right. With that one ID, you would already have access to all the APIs within the one ID that you said. And then when you populate the URL, it would differ from the function to function that you use. And then the template that we saw is auto-generated. Is that what you said?
Yes, let me go back to that screen. This entire template of functions, including all the code in here, is auto-generated for you. We as Here Technologies provided that as a benefit of what you get here at the Here Marketplace, right? This
Right.
identifier that you're referring to happens to be the key identifier that's your unique one for all those functions. So you'll notice this one begins with app1d. And so if I go back over to our code view, you'll see that at the beginning of that URL that I had just copied, that same identifier is there. So I'm going to take that.
Yes.
I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to put it into this, where it's asking for what is the Azure function. It's kind of like, what is the overall ID of the Azure functions that we're using? And I'm going to comment that out so it doesn't ruin my code. The next thing that I would do is at the very end of this line, you'll see where it says code equals. I'm going to take that whole value that's here, copy that, and place that into this line here, where it says code. So before I even go any further, Shruti, I'm just curious, are there any questions in the chat up to this point on any of the things we've done so far?
So currently there are no questions on the chat. So yeah, people please ask questions. If you think it's all good so far, then we can move on.
Yeah. So interrupt me if you see something come up.
Definitely.
Then now this API one, you see at the top where it says Azure Websites Net API Places, and then it just kind of stops, and then over here it says segments.
Right.
Well, this goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Shruti, when you said, hey, there might be various ways you can call our Places API. There might be different endpoints. And we've already seen that auto-suggest happens to be one of those. So I'm just going to keep that there. But when I'm saying what's our API endpoint, right now I'm using our auto-suggest one. So when we get down below to the actual invocation of this, you'll notice that what's our Azure function? That's the ID for all of our functions. What's our API? That's going to lead to our auto-suggest. We're going to be using the @in, which at this point is just at, right? So what's at that location? We'll again discuss what variances are there. Our geolocation is going to start here. This looks like I have San Francisco currently selected because I put that in my comments. And then what's our search going to be? So the search is going to be whatever was typed in by the user. If you forget this last part, essentially the API will not work because it's required to have that code on every single call when you're making a call to an Azure function. So are you ready to see the results of?
Michael, I think there's an issue. So if you scroll up, the comment that you made, it hasn't turned green. So I'm wondering if it is commented or not, the link.
It is not commented because I'm trying to use a JavaScript comment in an HTML document, which is a silly thing to do. So I can fix that real quick. Perfect. Thank you for calling that out. And voila.
Yeah. There we go.
So glad you said something. Okay. All right. Now are you ready to see this in action? Yes. So Azure Places, this is the page that we just did. I'm going to refresh it to make sure we have the most current version. Again, I want to make sure it's been saved here. Go back. And now we'll just start off. Now we're in San Francisco, but I'm going to start off with a food search again and click search. And what I have going on here is, of course, I want to see what the URL is when that got generated. I still want to see our result sets come in. And you can see the result sets. And it's the same principle of what we talked about before. If we wanted to see what are the different suggest items we could use, they're at the bottom below. But at the top, I could see the different categories. And then, of course, I could see the various places in that area in San Francisco. You're probably more interested in perhaps Berlin. So I'm going to switch back over to our code. I happen to have that right there.
So Michael, meanwhile, while you switch it to Berlin, we do have a question.
Yay.
So the question is from I Only Wear Lacoste, and they ask if this is available for other big cloud providers. So like Amazon, Google, Netlify.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Are these serverless type templates or functions available for others?
I think that's what, the question is.
At this time, we've had live streams on our Amazon connections, our AWS connections, which, yes, they have something corresponding that is called the serverless application repository. Same kind of principle where instead of Azure functions, it's Lambda functions. But yes, those exist. And yes, we have templates there that work very similarly. At this time, however, I believe we only are supporting these type of templates in 3 places that I'm aware of, and that is Microsoft, AWS, and also SAP. We have some there. But stay tuned. I know we have more in the works. But at this time, what's available today, we have those there. Great question.
Yeah. And also, if you would like to watch those videos, you have them in the twitch.tv/yodev, and you can see those episodes with AWS. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, I think, Peter, if you can, at some point, you might want to even just put the maybe an example of one of those episodes on YouTube into our chat, just in case anyone. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the serverless ones. I just talked to an unknown voice in my head, but yes. That's just how it works around here. Okay, so I've got the Berlin coordinates in there, Shruti.
Perfect.
So I'm going to go back over to our screen. I'm just gonna I'm gonna refresh, put food in here, and maybe you'll recognize some of these. I don't know, but it's definitely no longer in the United States. We're now in Berlin territory. And you'll notice this as well. Again, it recognizes where you're at, so you may receive some suggest features that are more language appropriate for that area as well. Okay, well, I think we're ready to start exploring other things you can do with places. Let's have a little bit of fun here. I'm going to go back over to our code. And the first thing that I want to acknowledge is we can be doing auto-suggest, but I'd like to do a different one. I'm going to use one called discover /search. Now, Shruti, you're aware of there's actually discover search, there's discover explore. What would be the difference between a search and an explorer? How would you describe it?
So if basically it's a very slight difference, but then if you want places with a specific category, like for example, you want places which serve snacks and it's a very specific category, then you would do explore. But then if you just want to search with a query, so if you don't know the name of the place or you don't know what exactly category is, but you have some idea, So if you would want to just search with a query, then you would do a search. So,
okay. So let's do that. We're going to do a search as opposed to auto-suggest. Now remember, auto-suggest is kind of that, I'll give you everything. You know, I'll give you suggest queries. I'll give you categories. I'm going to give you places. Search is going to give us places. And that's what we're looking for is actual places. I'll keep it in Berlin. I'm going to save this code. I'm going to go back over to our screen here, refresh, and I'm going to do the same exact search that we did before, just on food, right? And just search. Now, I don't know if you notice it, but there's no categories at the top, right? And if I scroll down, there's no suggest things as well, right? It's just places.
Yeah.
That's it. Now, if I expand the results, you'll notice it says that we received 20 items. And if I look at those, what do you find that's kind of interesting about this result set that's coming back? What do you see there as that? Well, right here. I tried to click on it, but it opened it up. But you see that, do you know what that distance refers to? Is that miles? Is that kilometers? Is it?
I'm pretty sure that's meters.
It's meters. You're right. It's meters. So a lot of places for food around that Berlin coordinates that you provided for us. So, but what if I'm, you know, I guess I want to say, I want you to start thinking about this. What if I only want to see like maybe the first 5 that come back or something like that? I want you to be thinking about that. But right before we go there, notice there's this next URL. And I know you know this already, but how would you describe what that next URL is for those that are watching?
So like Michael said, we've pulled up basically 20 results right now. And with this search, you can definitely find or search for more than 20 results. But then you don't want all the results on one single page. So what next does is it points you to the next page, which will load up another 20 results. So if you click on the next link or you handle the next link, you need to pick that up, create or reconstruct the query, and then you can get access to the results on the next page that you've already received.
Yeah. Very good. What does that mean for Azure Functions? She said it. You can't just call this link directly because you're actually calling your Azure function, which in turn will call our API. So if you wanted to use this, you would need to reconstruct the data from this and basically reconstruct it in your code. So we're just mentioning that just for completeness. If you wanted to have that page by page view, you would need to, basically reconstruct this so that it could be called to your Azure function as opposed to calling it directly. With that said, I'll now get back to the question at hand. What if I only want to see 10 of these items? What would I do? I'll switch back over to code. What would you say?
So what you would add is basically a parameter called size. And then you would set the size to 10 because you want to see 10 results. So
if I'm hearing you right, I'd put size equals 10 and then another ampersand to, that's all I have to do?
That's all.
This is crazy. So I'll go back over to our page. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to search for food again and do a search. And let's see, results come back.
Voila.
You're right. There you go.
Yeah.
So now what I want to do is I want to even be fussier about this. And what I mean is if I have to walk more than 400 meters, it's just too much work for me. So is there a way that I can restrict this to even just things within a certain radius?
So you could just go ahead and add a radius parameter next to the geo parameter. So if you just do semicolon r equals, you said 400 meters?
Yeah, why not?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what, as Trudy mentioned, we're now saying not only do we only want 10 results back, we now only want things that are going to be within a certain radius. So with that saved, I'm going to go back over to our, well, I'll do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I'm up to.
Yeah, exactly. We can just see what the result is anyway.
Exactly. We'll see the results. So I do my search. I look at my results, and I still see 10, and I still see things that are over. It didn't work. But that's because I think we're no longer searching at something.
Yeah.
I think we're now searching in something.
That's
right. So that's the reason why we have to change that right there. And in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to keep it as in and then take the radius off and see what happens. So right now, I'll leave the radius on just to see if this works. So I'll go back over to our screen here, refresh. Food has been our topic. I'll do a search and look at the results here. And it looks like, well, everything there seems to be less than 400. So this is a very important, of course, because especially consider some applications out there where perhaps you're making a mobile app or something where as the user is walking, they may want to have just things within a very close proximity to where they are. So this is a nice feature that developers can add to their apps to make sure they're just getting things that are relevant in location to the users. Okay, and as promised, I'm going to switch it back over to code and just take that radius off. And go back over to the code, do a refresh, make sure I'm using the latest stuff, type food again, and click our search. And oh no, I see red. and the reason is why, Shruti, what's going on?
So that's exactly the point. When you do an at, you don't really need a radius. You would say that I am at such and such a location and just give me places around me. But when you are specifying in, it means that you are in a radius. You want to be searching in certain radius. So you would have to give your center, your location, and then you would have to give a radius within which you want to search. So then which is why it gave us this error when we removed the radius parameter.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So in order, of course, for me to fix that, obviously I would need to change this back to at or add a radius, either one, as she mentioned. Okay. So with those things stated so far, let's just do perhaps an example of doing a discover explore. So as Shruti mentioned before, that means we're looking into searching. We want to explore some categories out there. And I believe that in order for that to work, I need to also change this queue to be a cat. So we're no longer searching based on a query. It's based on a category, and it needs to be a specific category.
Right.
So I'm going to save this page. I'm going to go back over into our code view and refresh. And Shruti, do you happen to have any categories fresh off the top that are familiar to you that you know very well?
So the simplest one could be restaurant.
Okay. I'll put that in there and type search. And basically what this is doing is it's providing, based again on the geolocation, all the restaurants that are in that area. So we're exploring those restaurants. And what I think is interesting about the Explore option, I don't know if you noticed this before, Shruti, but when you're using Explore categorically, do you notice that the results come back in order of distance? That could be very helpful. Yeah. Any other searches by category? I know you know another one.
Yeah, so restaurant would be too generic, and I am always in for a snack. So can we try snacks dash fast dash food?
So let's see it. Snacks dash fast dash food. Search. Voila. We have, so if you're in Berlin, you got some snack food places right here. And again, if I were to go back over to the new result sets, once again, as we do this, we can get that sorted distance because we use that Explore feature. It's going to return it back in that order for you because you're searching by category, and it wants to say, hey, here's the nearest one to you to the farthest one. And then, of course, let me ask you this, Shruti. If, again, I'm really lazy and I just want the results to come back under 400 meters, could I add a radius to an Explore?
You could do that, and then you would have to add an in instead of an at.
So glad you're here.
Let's try that.
Yeah. I'm putting the in, the 400, and going back over to our page. I'm going to refresh here. Oh, let me copy this before so I have less typing. Refresh. And let's do our search. And oh, look at that. I have a prime distance of all these different places in Berlin. I'm so glad you were here to help me on this. This is very good. So just to summarize while we're still here in our code view, I just want to highlight that essentially all the things we've done here in the Azure places, the only thing that was really different from our REST places is we didn't need to have our app ID and app code stored in with the call. Instead, we needed to have the Azure function ID and the Azure places code. If I were to switch over to our Azure function, you'll notice that the app ID and the app code are managed there as environment variables within here. So when it makes the call to our API, that's where the management of our credentials happens. It's at the Azure function level, not at the client level, which means you don't have to manage your app ID and your app code across multiple of your devices. You would just need to, for your devices, only have to know your own internal function for the Azure function and the Azure code. But the actual API credentials for us, you can secure them right here at our Azure function, which I think is really nice. All right. So again, very little difference. All the little variances we did, like with Discover Explore, Discover Search, our auto suggest, all of that, you could do directly with our own API, or you could do with our Azure. So you're not losing any feature by using one or the other. It's basically a pass-through. All right. So I would say let's return now to our studio.
Let's.
Woo. We're back, Shruti. We are back at the studio. What an awesome way to do the code, and I really appreciate that. I want to make sure that everyone knows that this episode will be available briefly right here on Twitch TV /HereDev, but then it will be on our YouTube channel by next week. So please, if you haven't done so already, check out all the live streams that we've done in the past, not just our AWS connections, not just our Azure connections, but we have Waypoint episodes that we've done on a variety of different topics. Find one that you love. I'm sure you will. We definitely have a library there now. I mean, it has been built over this year, and it's been fun even at conferences that I go to, like one that I went to for AWS recently, and also when I was in Milan last week. Just even sharing some of these directly with some of the attendees was very helpful because some topics are that specific. So highly recommend to take a look at those previous episodes. Shruti, were there any other questions in Slack that we want to address?
There was just one which we've already answered, but I would like to repeat it.
Oh,
so
please.
The distances that you saw in the results were definitely in meters. And
yes.
With the explore option, the discover/explore, the results are actually sorted by distance. So the closest one is the first, and as you go. So yeah, just to say it again, the distance was in meters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. If you still have more questions, please join our Slack channel. And I believe that will also be provided by our producer up above somewhere. And
he's super fast.
He is very fast. Then, if you'd like to reach out to us through any kind of social media, I know you can find us. We mentioned it at the beginning, but Shruti, would you once again mention what your Twitter alias is?
So my Twitter is Kubera Speaking, Kubera_speaking.
I believe Peter's going to add that probably to the chat. And mine is Palermo4. And then our whole team, what's our team one, Shruti?
Pure Dev. It's
Pure Dev. Absolutely. All right. So what's happening in our future? Our next episode is going to be on November 21st, 10 a.m. Pacific time. It's a special episode of Exploring XYZ. And if I recall correctly, Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think this has to do with our exciting Mapathon contest that is running. Is it too late for people to join this hackathon? I don't think so.
Here,
I think you could.
Can you hear me?
That's a question for Peter, but I'm sure you could still enter and join that Mapathon
yes,
now.
You can still join. There's a link in chat now, and I think submissions are due by November 3rd or 4th, if I'm wrong.
It's the 3rd,
yeah.
This just in, folks.
Extend it.
It basically, I'm repeating you unless you were talking and people could hear you.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm available.
So we don't know the difference. It could be a voice in my head. It could be something you hear. So I'm glad that you said something, Peter. Thank you.
Yes. Sorry. I was talking I was live, but you had no idea. Yeah. So the Mapathon is, I think it might be extended. But look out for that. I think we'll post on our Twitter when we update that.
That sounds good. Okay.
And then disappear.
Okay. And then we have a new AWS episode coming soon. What does that mean? Stay tuned to find out. Stay tuned. Okay. One shameless plug that I'd like to offer. I didn't even ask you this, Shruti. I don't know the answer. Are you going to be at reInvent?
I am not going to be at reInvent. I will be in Munich.
Oh, okay. Well, for what are you going to be in Munich for, though?
So I'm doing 2 workshops at the Technical University of Munich. There's going to be 2 workshops for 2 different classes. So one is a master's class and then the other is a bachelor's class. And it will be a hands-on workshop where they will learn to use our APIs and create a cool map with amazing applications. And
Cool. Nice little plug there. So those in Munich, yay. And those going to Las Vegas, first week of December, reInvent. Hopefully we can sync up there because I will be there with a couple of my teammates, and we are definitely going to be chatting about all sorts of cool things you could do with our location services within that platform. Make sure that you are following our channel, turn on notifications for future episodes. That's very helpful. And without anything else, I just want to say thank you once again, Shruti, for joining us late in the hour out there in Berlin. Do you have any closing words or comments you'd like to say?
I really enjoyed being on the episode, and I was nervous because it was my first ever live stream, but it was great. I had a lot of fun, and hopefully I'll come pop in once again for another stream.
Yes, I hope so too. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Peter, for all the hard work that you do behind the scenes to make these episodes exciting and cool. And that's it for now from the developer relations team at here. Thank you so much. We'll catch us next time.